things going on behind the scenes or in ways that often were never seen to be properly explained or known about, and in a way within a context of an organisation that displayed dysfunctional features.
The Home Secretary has deferred the decision on whether to licence the use of water cannon in London until after the general election. The London Mayor purchased 2 machines second-hand for around £200,000 last year to be used by police in the event of rioting. At the time, Boris Johnson told LBC Theresa May should licence them.
Londoners support it. What we are doing is saving money. I think this is the way forward. We've been around this a lot now, and we've got to get on and do it.
A man who became a multi-millionaire years after divorcing his wife could now be forced to give her a payout. The Supreme Court has ruled Kathleen Wyatt can make a claim against Dale Vince, even though she lodged it nearly 20 years after they split up. She wants nearly £2 million, but the judge said she can expect to win far less. Ed Miliband has accused the Prime Minister of running for cover like a bully for refusing to take part in a head-to-head TV debate with him. David Cameron says he'll only take part in one discussion between 7 leaders. At Prime Minister's questions, he denied he was chickening out of the events.
We've had 4 years of debates and we found out he's got no policies, he's got no plan, he's got no team, he's got no clue of running the country.
A former chairman of the BBC and ITV has accused the broadcaster of breaching impartiality rules by threatening to stage debates without the Prime Minister. Lord Grade has told Sheila it would be a very serious mistake if the TV companies were to empty chair David Cameron.
Impartiality is enshrined in the BBC's charter and is enshrined in parliamentary statute for the commercial licensed broadcasters. I just don't see how they could do it.
Paul Gascoigne has told the High Court that phone hacking contributed to his alcoholism. The former England footballer is giving evidence to a hearing to determine what compensation should be paid by Mirror Group newspapers. Jeremy Clarkson has joked that he is off to the job centre after being suspended by the BBC. The corporation is investigating claims he tried to punch one of Top Gear's producers. More than 350,000 people have now signed a petition calling for Clarkson to be reinstated. And UKIP has sacked Winston McKenzie as the party's Commonwealth spokesman. He's still the candidate for UKIP in Croydon North and in the past has compared Nigel Farage to Jesus. LBC weather turning cloudier this afternoon with patchy rain for London and the southeast later, highs of 13 degrees. Cloudy and damp across much of England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland with heavy rain in places. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Simon Conway.
Is it just me, or are there more germs in this carriage than passengers? Seriously, a packed doctor's waiting room is a healthier place to be. Too late! Whatever's catching, I've definitely caught it now.
Sick of commuting? Try video meetings using Citrix GoToMeeting from home. Save time, money and your health. Start your free 30-day trial now. Visit gotomeeting.co.uk.
This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation with Sheila Fogarty. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Sheila Fogarty on LBC.
Hello, good afternoon to you. If you're just joining us, Grant Shapps, the Conservative Party chairman, is with us for how long? I always get it wrong.
I think we're doing an hour today. We've been promoted to an hour.
Finally, we've been promoted to an hour.
It's an hour earlier.
I know what I...
Oh,
I see. Yeah. That's not what confuses me. It's the rest that confuses me. I know what I want to ask Mr. Shapps. What do you want to ask Mr. Shapps? 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. You might want to ask him about defence, those comments the Prime Minister made yesterday on this programme. You might want to ask him about free schools, maybe. You might want to ask him about Jeremy Clarkson or the debates. Who knows? The choice is yours. 0345 6060 973. You can tweet at LBC or text 84850. Do you watch Jeremy Clarkson's programme?
I watch it over the shoulders of my kids who watch it there. I've got twins who are 10 and an older boy who's 13. Boy, girl, boy, and they all love the show. I don't think it's anything to do with cars. I think they just think it's entertainment, and that's why they watch it.
It's an incredibly imaginative programme I have no interest in cars other than to get me from A to B, but it is an incredibly imaginatively made programme.
Yes, the stunts become more and more exotic by the week, it seems to me. There's more extreme reasons for mentioning a car in something which has nothing to do with cars at all.
It is extraordinary, and I think it is a peculiar... well, maybe I'm wrong about it being a peculiarly British thing, but I think it's a peculiarly British thing that we can spend ages in this country talking about whether a man who presents a programme about cars should keep his job, when in fact there are many, many more important... I'm guilty of it myself.
Well, here we are. We're discussing it. It's this and TV debates. It's the only thing the media want to talk about.
Well, let's start with TV debates. You know, walked yourself into that, I suppose, but it won't go away, will it, for some reason?
Well, I think it's partly because what the media wants to talk about is stuff which is good for the media, and so you know, talking about TV debates, and I think that's just one of those things. What was interesting about Prime Minister's questions today, for anyone who actually caught any of it, is the leader of the opposition used 6 whole questions, not to ask about the economy, not to ask about jobs, not to ask about defence or anything else, but to ask about television debates. I think the whole thing's become a little bit ludicrous.
Well, if the debates happened, he could do it then, couldn't he?
We want them to happen. We've actually, in fact, David Cameron's sort of said, let's do it. Let's do it the week of the 23rd of March. It's a couple of weeks' time. Let's hold the debate. Let's have all the people who are likely to, leading the parties in the room, and let's get it done. But somehow we still don't seem to have agreement on it.
But that 7-cornered one that the Prime Minister's in favour of, I mean, I think we've worked out that each leader would probably, and again, impartiality, there are stopwatches on this kind of thing during election campaigns, and quite right too, that everybody would get about 10 minutes each. You might as well just send the voters a letter.
I think the problem is, in this election, which is clearly very, very, very open, is you've got 2 possible outcomes. David Cameron could be returned. It requires, I think I mentioned to you this figure before, 11,000 voters to vote differently to last time, to vote Conservative in 23 seats, and Conservatives have a majority of 1. Or it's going to be a combination of the others. So you have Ed Miliband losing lots of those seats in Scotland. You'll end up with the SNP, possibly Alex Salmond supporting Ed Miliband in government. So therefore, you've got to have the other people in the room,
here,
don't
Nicola
you?
Sturgeon is the leader of the SNP, and I know Alex Salmond is the candidate for the SNP for Westminster. One of them. But why does the Conservative Party keep talking about Alex Salmond when Nicola Sturgeon is the leader of that party?
Because Nicola Sturgeon is not in Westminster.
I know, but still.
Well, that's how a government is made up of people who are in Westminster, not somewhere else. So Alex Salmond would be the person in power, and we think, basically Ed Miliband would be in Alex Salmond's pocket running the show.
We know you think that. We've seen the poster.
Seen the poster.
And the memes.
And that's why, if you're going to have a debate, you've got to have those people in the room. Otherwise, you don't really find out, is Alex Salmond going to require, for example, Ed Miliband to drop Trident as a nuclear defence for this country, just at the time where Russia and Putin are becoming so powerful? Let
me go to the calls. Robert in Great Bissenden. Hi, Robert. What did you want to ask Grant Shapps?
Hello there. I just wanted to say that I think it looked, and I'm a Tory supporter, but it does look to me like David Cameron's running away from an argument on the telly with Ed Miliband. And I don't think that's right. I think he ought to be up there on the screen arguing. I think that's what people would like to see. I'd like to see it.
Well, Robert, look, first of all, David Cameron does want to do a debate, which is why he's actually put forward the proposal in a couple of weeks' time.
But you mean the head-to-head, Robert, don't you?
He does. I think he's putting obstacles in the way to enable him to say, it can't now go ahead. That's the way it seems to me.
Look, this is interesting, isn't it? Because we had the chance today, a head-to-head at midday today with Ed Miliband and David Cameron. What did Ed Miliband spend the entire half hour on? The debates, not the issues, but the debates. And I'm afraid, I was just saying a moment ago, I don't know if you were just listening there whilst you were waiting on the line, but we're going to have a situation where if Ed Miliband crawls into Downing Street, sort of through the gates, it will be with the support of the SNP, who look like doing very well in Scotland. There's no other numerical way for him to get there. So we do need to know what Alex Salmond or Nicola Sturgeon or the SNP thinks. They need to be in that debate as well.
Crawls into Downing Street. It's rather emotive language.
Crawls through the gates. Well, he's not going to be able to win it outright on his own, is he?
Well, neither was David Cameron.
Well, I just said all we need is 11,200 people across 23 seats to vote Conservative, and David Cameron has a majority. Labour would need, at the moment, 70 seats in order to win hundreds of thousands of votes. And if the polls are to be believed, in Scotland, if Labour are to lose Labour seats in Scotland, they'll need even more wins in England. So 80, 90 seats. No one thinks Ed Miliband's going to do that without being in some sort of coalition with the SNP.
Robert?
Well, I think that's possibly true, but then I think that can all be capitalised on in a televised debate. It does seem to me that he's putting up reasons not to go head-to-head with Miliband, but saying, well, this person has to attend and that person has to attend, and he'll only do it if there's 5 other people in the room.
That said, though... Yeah.
Of a conversation.
That said, though, Robert, he has proposed that we just do these debates in 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, get the thing done. And yes, you're right that we think that since Ed Miliband would have to be propped up by some of these others, it's probably right they're in the room, because the demands of, say, the SNP dropping on nuclear defence, spending an extra 180 billion, these things would be material to the way that Ed Miliband would have to run his government, and people would need to see that. But yeah, for heaven's sake, let's get on with it. That's what we've been saying.
Don't you think if political engagement is a problem, don't you think that if David Cameron were in here with me now, in the seat you're in, Ed Miliband was sitting to my left here, I was interviewing you both, asking you both questions, getting you both to respond to each other's points and taking calls. That's really robust democracy, isn't it, in an election campaign? That would be great. And it would be on the radio. You could come in your pyjamas. We could crack open a bottle of wine. It'd be very relaxed. Let's do it.
I think there's 2 points to make. The first is, actually, 2 hours ago, with the speaker in the chair that you're sitting in.
You keep repeating that, but you know...
Well, hold on.
No, I won't. Hold on. You know Prime Minister... I've been in many, many, many Prime Minister's questions. You know Prime Minister's questions is nothing like this, and it's nothing like the TV debates.
2 things. It doesn't help that the Leader of the Opposition, who drives the questions, doesn't ask sensible questions about unemployment, how we plan to get to full employment in this country, the economy or anything else. But putting that aside, when you think about debates, what's interesting is a lot of the time I hear people, the broadcasters say, but there were 20 million people who tuned into a debate. That's true. The other thing they did was suck the whole life out of the election campaign.
You've said that last week as well, and
let me just finish this point on it, though.
But just before we do, I dispute that because... There is a tendency amongst Westminster politicians to focus on just 1 or 2 bits of broadcasting and 1 or 2 bits of the press across the country. People are getting their political news in local radio, in local television, in regional television, in their local papers, online. This isn't all about Newsnight. This isn't all about the Today programme, and it isn't all about the TV
You're actually
debates.
making the point that I was coming on to make, which I didn't make to you previously.
But it didn't suck. The point I'm making is it didn't suck the life out.
No, the point I was going to make is...
all of those things still happen.
Well, no, this is the point I wanted to make. When you are on a debate, you are broadcasting like we are now. We're telling people. When you take a phone call, which doesn't happen in those debates, when you travel around the country, when you do the local media, when you speak to people in local community centres and at places of work, you are listening to people. And I think that is the difference between debating on air and actually going out and meeting people. And my point that I wanted to just develop there was what the debates did last time, because there were 3 of them, and during the campaign, has sucked the ability to actually go around the country and have all those conversations. It became a broadcast election, whereas what we want it to be is an interactive election. By all means, have the debates, do them locally.
How much more interactive could it be than David Cameron here, Ed Miliband there, me here, callers coming in left, right and centre all around the country? That's pretty interactive. Let's do it.
Well, look, I'm sure there'll be many, many opportunities during the election to have, brilliant broadcasters like you, Sheila, ask the questions of both of them. But I also think we need to be able to let our leaders get out into the country, meet the local people, meet local newspapers, and do the things which actually bring an election to life. And let's have the debates, but let's do the debate now. We've got an offer on the table.
OK, Simon in Palmer's Green wants to ask a question about defence, I think, Simon.
Absolutely. Yesterday I heard David Cameron talking about the 2% spending on defence, and he said we're spending a cash sum 36 billion. What I want to know is, why is defence a cash sum of 36 billion, irrespective of how the economy's doing, and yet the overseas aid you've put into law as 0.7 of GDP, which can fluctuate? Surely, at this time, we should be spending more on defence.
Well, first of all, I agree with you that defence is incredibly important. In fact, I think it's the first job of any government. I'm one of Her Majesty's ministers. I think my first responsibility as a minister is the defence of this country, and you should always be investing in that, and we will continue to increase the defence budget as a result. The fact of the matter is, we've got a programme going forward of £163 billion that is just about the equipment. I'm not talking about the people, I'm not talking about the army itself, I'm talking about the equipment over the next 10 years. This is aircraft, the advanced ships, this is submarines. It's a massive programme. The second thing is, we're committed, Conservatives are committed, to not reduce the size of the standing army, and indeed increase the number of territorials, so that we'll have, actually by the end of the next Parliament, a proper shaped army to defend this country. And you asked the specific question about the 2%. We have delivered 2% all the way through this Parliament, despite having to make, pretty difficult decisions elsewhere on the cuts. And we're actually promising to deliver it this next year coming, 2015, 2016. So that's in line as well. I'm not going to kind of write the next budget today. You can wait for next week for the next budget, actually, or even the one after.
Is it finished yet? Do you know?
It's looking pretty good shape. Okay. But I can't do that today. But look at our record, judge us by our record, and you'll see that we have not only sorted out a 38 billion black hole that existed because procurement and defence has been a disaster for years. We've sorted that out, made a bunch of difficult decisions elsewhere, and actually kept to 2% defence budget in the meantime.
Brief response, Simon?
I don't agree with it. NATO says you have to spend $2 billion. We've got generals, we've got leaders of the British forces saying we're under pressure. If 1982 Falklands happened again, could we protect the Falklands Isles like we did in 1982? The answer is no.
No, the answer is definitely yes.
Get it right and get it sorted out. Stop doing weasel words. Stop saying you're saying cash sums. Spend 2%. Spend more than 2%. We need it.
Look, every country has to make decisions about how to spend money. Goodness knows we got into enough of a mess by spending over 10% more than we're collecting in every year, right? So you've got to make those difficult decisions to balance the budget. Look at our record, Simon, during this Parliament, and we've done exactly, not 2 billion as you just mentioned, 2%, as I think you meant. So 36 billion, as the Prime Minister says, on defence, and a massive programme, £163 billion going forward on all the equipment and kit that we need. So we will have the best resource. We have one of the biggest defence budgets in the world, and we intend to Conservatives kind of totally get the first thing you do as a nation is you defend your country. It's your first responsibility, and we will not let people down on that front.
What about David Cameron and the generals, or the top brass in the military? Because you'll know this, a former Ministry of Defence special advisor has said that David Cameron gave a personal assurance that spending would increase after 2015. It was a kind of a pledge to make the pill at the time less bitter to swallow.
I don't think anyone's in any disagreement about the budget increasing. What we're discussing here are the priorities overall. And as I say, I'm already saying we're going to protect the size of the army, so that won't fall. We're going to increase the number of territorials. By the way, in my own constituency, my agent who runs things for me locally, called Johnny Ball, he's a territorial. He goes away a few weeks every year. He actually trains and fights for this country, or trains for this country. Hopefully won't be fighting, but you never know what's going to happen next. And we believe in the territorials, and I believe in that myself with the military corporate covenant that I've signed across Welwyn Hatfield in my own constituency.
So there's no reneging on that word he gave the generals?
No, absolutely not. Look, and you'd expect generals to sort of wanted to be pointing out the kind of, of course, everyone in every sector is going to say, we want money for our area. But there are many different areas.
But that might not be just a kind of protectionism. That might be because they genuinely, like you, defending the realm, defending everybody in the realm. I imagine people who've, fought and hands-on for their country would feel even more deeply that responsibility.
Well, I feel it very strongly myself, say, through the corporate military covenant that I've been signing businesses up to in Welwyn Hatfield, by employing somebody who is himself a territorial, by this government having put into law the corporate covenants as well to make sure that we have a formal agreement with our servicemen, ex-servicemen and women, but that actually we respect you because you have done things which go beyond, in a sense, the call of duty.
When you talk about that budget increase that you say is that there's no problem with that, there's no disagreement that you've been clear there will be a budget increase. Will that be a defence spend as we would currently recognise it, or will that take in security and intelligence? Will that be lumped in under defence funding?
Well, look, I've heard a lot of arguments about this, and it certainly is of course the case that if you're doing things that MI5 do, the secret intelligence agencies, defending this nation from terrorist activity.
So there'll be a merging, almost a notional merging of those figures.
Yeah, but not in a way that I think your question sort of tries to get at, which is, are you just going to try and fudge this in order to? I think
those, real increase.
Yes, but I also want to make the point that I think those things are very important matters to do with the defence of our realm, but I don't. There's no sense or attempt to try to muddy the waters. We believe this country has to have strong defences. We believed in sorting out the mess that was left behind with £38 billion black hole in all the messed up procurement projects from the past, and we now have a very strong programme of £163 billion on equipment, plus a guarantee to carry on employing, the size of the regular army and increasing the number of territorials.
OK, we'll pause here for the travel news, but we'll take more calls from you for Grant Shapps, the Tory party chairman, in just a moment. 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Plenty of calls coming in. Keep them coming. It's 2:20.
I'm Joanne Webb. In the LBC Travel Centre in London, in Willesden, the High Road is closed in both directions at Park Avenue, and that's following an accident. Just south of the Blackwall Tunnel, a lorry overturned this morning on the Sun in the Sands roundabout. It's still being recovered, but it means that Shooters Hill Road is closed westbound, and there are long delays in Twickenham on the A316 to the Whitton Road roundabout in both directions, and that's because of the roadworks. In Staffordshire, the M6 is very slow southbound to junction 11A at the M6 toll. It's still taking about 20 minutes to get through. That was after an accident that happened earlier. In Worcestershire, the M42 is very slow southbound to junction 3 at Portway, and that's because of an accident where one lane is closed. And there are problems in Manchester. The M60 clockwise has been closed at junction 19, and that's at Heaton Park, and it's following an accident. Now, the actual diversion is only via the exit slip road and then round the roundabout and back onto the motorway, but even so, it's still causing queues. Keeping you moving, your next travel update is in half an hour.
This is LBC.
It's that time of year again. Time to turn the lights down low and be seduced by a dazzling French model, like the Renault Clio Dynamique, from only £149 per month, with 4 years 0% APR representative until March 31st during Renault Romance season. Ooh la la. 0% APR representative Renault Finance. Deposit 1321, 48 monthly payments of 149, final payment 5023. At participating dealers only, subject to status, over 18s. T's and C's apply. See Renault.co.uk/offers.
To the wheelbarrow race winners and the Sunday League smashers, the chainsaw juggling champions and the sword scoffing masters, to the triathletes, the mathletes, to all of our fellow number ones, we say, boom! You did it, and so did we.
O2 has been ranked #1 network for customer service satisfaction by Ofcom for the 6th time in a row. O2, be more dog.
What about this one, love?
Is it semi-detached?
Yeah.
Is it 3 bedrooms?
Uh-huh.
Does it have an ensuite?
Yeah.
Gas central heating?
Uh-huh.
Garden?
Yep.
South-facing?
Yeah.
Conservatory?
Yep.
Shops nearby?
Yeah.
Off-road parking?
Yeah.
Double glazing?
Mm-hmm.
Does it have a walk-in wardrobe?
It's got a shed.
It's difficult enough choosing the right house. At NatWest, we help make choosing your mortgage easier. We can even tell you how much you could borrow in just 10 minutes. Talk to us today about our lowest ever mortgage rates, or search NatWest Mortgages.
If you're a mummy or a daddy and you smoke in the car, you probably don't know that over 80% of cigarette smoke is invisible. That means that even if you smoke out of the car window, smoke could be blowing back in and dangerous chemicals could still be getting into my lungs. Nasty stuff like carbon monoxide, arsenic and cyanide. If you could see all the poisons in your car, you wouldn't smoke.
Search Smoke Free for free support.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Top Gear star Jeremy Clarkson, and now it would seem in a row over food.
Clarky is one of those people that has a brilliant wit, a brilliant turn of phrase.
Jeremy Clarkson is Katie Hopkins on wheels. So I'm not surprised she's actually defended him.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Every weekday morning from 7 on LBC.
With Hampton by Hilton, with over 2,000 hotels worldwide.
Grant Shapps, the Conservative Party chairman, is here with me. You can call him and ask any question you like. 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Can I just ask you about the tone of the campaign so far? Ed Miliband's wife, Justine, she gave an interview to the BBC, didn't she, yesterday, in which she said she expected the tone to get worse, and that she was up for the fight, and that she and her husband can handle the personal remarks. But I mean, you just used the word crawl into Downing Street. David Cameron described Ed Miliband as despicable in the House of Commons. Do we need this kind of...
I was really surprised everyone's shocked at the word despicable. I love that film, Despicable 1 and 2, which I've been to see. I didn't realise it was like some swear word.
Well, despicable is a, Jimmy Savile's despicable.
Well, Well, yeah, but Prime Minister's questions is a knockabout Punch and Judy. Everyone knows that.
You see, it's not a debate. That's my point.
Everyone knows that's, and it makes me laugh when the Speaker says no one's interested. Well, I had 120 constituents at Parliament last night, and they all want to come to Prime Minister's questions next. And I said, that's fine. I'm definitely trying to get you tickets. There's a 5-year waiting list that I've got for constituents to come there, so people definitely like to come see it. But no, look, in terms of the tone of the campaign,
it's important that people respect each other, though, isn't it?
Yes, but I'll tell you one interesting thing that I always say to constituents when they come visit, which is, how many times do you think we actually have a vote, a division over an issue with the opposition? And people say, well, it must be 80% of the time, you're always arguing and bickering. I said, actually, if you look at the figures, most things are never pushed to the vote. Even when they do, it's just what they call an oral vote. All those in favour say aye, no. Very rarely, actually, does the division bell go compared with the number of decisions being made. So, of course, the impression everybody has of Parliament is Prime Minister's questions. The reality is, actually, most of the time we have pretty good, sensible debates and make decisions. But you actually were asking a question about the tone of the campaign. Look, I think this should be a positive campaign. I think on the Conservative side, we want to say something very simple to people, which is we have turned this country around, we've got the fastest growing economy in the developed world, we've got tumbling unemployment. We want to finish off the job by having full employment, by having jobs for everybody who wants them, by therefore being able to pay for our NHS and long-term care and the rest of it. And that is our message. Now, I know that we will be hit by the opposition with their messages. Sometimes there's a necessity to point out what might happen if the other people get in. So as we started this programme, where I was saying I believe the only way for Ed Miliband to get into Downing Street, crawl or otherwise, is with Alex Salmond and support of the SNP, people who want to break up this country in the government. Now, I think it's right to point that out to people.
Let's get David on from Enfield. Hi, David.
Good afternoon, Greg. How are you?
Good, Grant. Yeah, hi, David.
Go on, David.
Grant, my question's about the national debt. When the coalition came to power in 2010, our national debt was about 950 billion. It now stands at around about 1.5 trillion, and that translates to £60,000 for every household in the United Kingdom. That's despite the fact that the coalition raised the value-added tax when it promised before there would be no tax increases. Now, Given that the deficit this year is going to be around 90 billion, why should we believe any political parties who are giving us these optimistic projections that they will have the deficit sorted out?
Yes, I hear the opposition make this claim an awful lot. They say, hold on, the debt has gone up under this government. Well, of course, the reality is if you are spending too much every year and then you want to reduce the amount that you're overspending every year, then in the meantime, the debt will carry on rising. It's rather like turning around a supertanker. You can't do it in a handbrake turn. You have to do a gradual turn. That gradual turn in our case has been, we have, as a size of the economy, halved the deficit. The last figure was 90 billion or 92 billion. We'll hear an update to that, actually, David, on next Wednesday at the budget. You may find it's a bit lower than that. But you're right, there's still more deficit to pay off. The deficit is just the amount that you're overspending by every year. Of course, there is an argument that you should go further and make the cuts deeper. We thought that would be unacceptable. We thought that would be cutting services too far. And instead, what we've done is had a gradual programme. We say that in another 2 years, 2 to 3 years, we'll have a surplus year on year. And that's when that debt, the 1.5 trillion you mentioned, will start to fall. But the argument that we could do it any faster, we judged would be a bad idea. It would have meant cutting services too far too fast.
Well, but that brings me on to the real choice. You talked there a moment ago about what the choice that voters have. Isn't the real choice even starker? Isn't it that with the Conservatives, it will be small state, deep, damaging cuts, and just take the pain. With Labour, it's cuts more slowly, they would say at a more humane pace, and a rather larger state, which you would characterise as too large.
No, add something to the last point you made. Actually, Labour is saying even by the end of the next Parliament, we won't be paying down that debt that David was just talking about. So they're never talking about getting rid of the deficit in the next Parliament. So the debt would carry on increasing.
They've said they'll balance the budget in this Parliament. In the first Parliament, sorry.
It's a trick of words. What they're talking about is only the deficit is made up of 3 different parts. They're talking about balancing 2 of the parts, not the third. It means that they would carry on borrowing money every single year. What they hope would happen, who knows, is that the economy would grow and that the percentage of the deficit would fall, but without ever reducing the debt. So they would carry on borrowing. And I disagree with your characterisation of like what the different parties would do. Yes, you're right. We want to eradicate the deficit and start paying, have a surplus, start paying off the debt, so future generations aren't saddled with debt they can't possibly repay. But we don't think it's a choice between that and cutting services to the bone. Just to be clear, if Conservatives are elected, we will go back to the levels of spending we last saw in this country as long ago as 2002. So, I mean, this idea that we won't have a state, that we won't look after, this is just ridiculous. This government has gone out of its way to make sure that the cuts have fallen on those with the broadest shoulders and the vulnerable are protected, and that's absolutely the right way to do this.
Can I ask you about that surplus that George Osborne, well, all of you have talked about into the next Parliament if you remain in government? 23 billion, I think, was the figure put on it, a surplus of 23 billion. That clearly will be achieved partly through deep cuts, and you've made no bones about that. There will be deep cuts. Ed Miliband used a figure of 70 billion. You said he's making up the figures as he goes along. What is that figure?
Yeah, on a postage stamp, I'd say. The figure's actually 30 billion. That's the amount of cuts that we now need to balance budget by 2017, 2018.
And to achieve that £23 billion
13
surplus.
billion from departments of government, as we've done this time round. So, people who are involved in local government will know that we've reduced the budgets there. People involved in policing know we've reduced the budgets there. Interestingly, satisfaction in local councils has risen, and crime has dropped by a fifth. So it just shows you can sometimes do things more efficiently.
But the surplus goes into 19 and 20, 2019, 2020.
Yeah, sorry, I should just answer your question. So 13 billion from departments, 12 billion from welfare cuts, and 5 billion from closing the tax loopholes further, as we've done during this Parliament. That's how we get to our 30 billion. Ed Balls came out and made a speech earlier in the week. He just appeared to be making up the figures as he went along. In fact, it was pretty extraordinary because what he did was fail to take into account some of the figures that the IFS, that's the Institute for Fiscal Studies, had sort of certified, and came up with this extraordinary figure of 70 billion. In his speech said that would mean closing 3 government departments. He came out of his speech probably realising he'd gone a bit too far, was challenged by the BBC. He went, no, I didn't really mean they would be closing government departments.
But with respect, you still haven't answered my question about that £23 billion surplus going into 2019, 2020 if you remain in government, because that won't be achieved by those £30 billion cuts that you've just mentioned. Therefore, it will be achieved by what? Deeper cuts, which may be the figure that Ed Balls came up with. So
just to be clear, I think it's the Office of Budget Responsibilities figure that you're quoting, 23, I think they say 23, 24 billion pounds. It's not a government figure. This is an independent Office of Budget.
So that might change in the budget next week, for example.
They make the projections. One of the things that George Osborne did when he became Chancellor was say, look, let's stop having the Treasury and the government making its own projections. Let's have this independent body.
But the choice to seek a surplus is a political one.
Yes. So to answer your question, the 30 billion is what we need. That's all we need. We don't need something else to get to their projection of.
But you're still only taking me up to 2017. I want you to go beyond that and give me some thoughts on 2019-20, because in 2019-20, George Osborne has said he wants a surplus. Let's forget what the figure is. He wants a substantial surplus. That means less spending. So Labour would have, you talk about Labour borrowing, but in that period, Labour would have more to spend because they were making less cuts. They would be growing an economy by spending more.
Well, look, if one thing has been categorically disproved over the last 5 years, it's that you can somehow spend money to sort out a problem of having spent too much money already. Every family, every person listening to this knows that's complete codswallop.
You don't stop spending altogether, do you? None of us does that.
Well, hold on, we haven't done that. And as a result, as a result of following our long-term plan, let's look at the evidence. We now have the fastest growing economy in the developed world, the fastest growing developed economy in Europe, and look at the alternatives. Look what France did, which was to follow. Ed Miliband said he wanted to follow what Francois Hollande's done, the French president. He stood on the Elysee steps with him, and he's led France to having very little growth, more businesses going bust than ever before, and nearly twice our unemployment.
OK, but people won't be that interested in listening to you about the French example. I've gone on too long. The newsroom are probably going to kill me, so we'll pause for now. But the upshot really of what you've just said to me there is that yes, those cuts would be much deeper if the Conservatives were to get into
power.
We
believe in having a surplus, and the economy is growing. The idea that after 6 years of economic growth you shouldn't be producing a surplus, I think, is dangerous.
OK, it's coming up to 2:35. Let's get the headlines from Simon Conway.
An unpublished report has revealed claims a housing manager may have been murdered in London in 1993 because he was about to expose a paedophile ring. Lambeth Council says it's working closely with police following allegations abuse was carried out in the basement of a council building in the 1990s. 3 people have been found guilty of helping the men who killed a nursery teacher in North London to evade justice. Last year, 3 drug dealers were convicted of murdering Sabrina Moss, who was shot in the street while out celebrating her 24th birthday. A decision on whether to licence the use of water cannon by police in London has been deferred by the Home Secretary until after the general election. The machines were bought by the Mayor last year to be used in exceptional circumstances. MPs are due to vote shortly on plans to introduce plain cigarette packets in England. They'd see packaging standardised across the tobacco industry from next year to make smoking less glamorous. LBC weather turning cloudier this afternoon for London and the southeast with some patchy rain later, highs of 13 degrees, cloudy and damp across much of England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland with the rain heavy in places. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Simon Conway.
This is LBC.
Whether you're a butcher, baker, bar owner, jeweller, architect, mechanic, cat groomer, IT consultant, malt producer, tree chopper, bespoke dog suit maker, exotic fruit seller, onesie tailor or pig breeder, employers across the UK, however small the business, will soon have to provide a workplace pension, even if you employ just one person. It's the law. Act now and find out when this affects you. Search the Pensions Regulator. Workplace pensions. We're all in. The Pensions Regulator is empowered by the UK Government to regulate workplace pensions.
What about this one, love?
Is it semi-detached?
Yeah.
Is it 3 bedrooms?
Uh-huh.
Does it have an ensuite?
Yeah.
Gas central heating?
Uh-huh.
Garden?
Yep.
South-facing?
Yeah.
Conservatory?
Yep.
Shops nearby?
Yeah.
Off-road parking?
Yeah.
Double glazing?
Mm-hmm.
Does it have a walk-in wardrobe?
It's got a shed.
It's difficult enough choosing the right house. At NatWest, we help make choosing your mortgage easier. We can even tell you how much you could borrow in just 10 minutes. Talk to us today about our lowest ever mortgage rates or search NatWest Mortgages.
To the wheelbarrow race winners and the Sunday League smashers, the chainsaw juggling champions and the sword scoffing masters, to the triathletes, the mathletes, to all of our fellow number ones, we say, boom! You did it. And so did we.
O2 has been ranked #1 network for customer service satisfaction by Ofcom for the 6th time in a row. O2, be more dog.
I know. The state pension is changing.
I know. How much you get will still depend on your national insurance record. And it's being made clearer to help me understand.
I know. I'll be able to see how much I'm likely to receive and understand what I can do to improve my state pension.
I know. If you reach state pension age on or after the 6th of April 2016, you'll be part of the new scheme.
Make sure you know the facts about the new state pension. Visit gov.uk/yourstatepension for more information.
If you run a business and you're near a computer, type the name of your company into Google now. Chances are everything you find will be good. But all it takes is one negative review and your reputation on any kind of digital and social media site can change just like that. Reputation.com can manage and improve your brand's image online to make sure potential customers find out about the good reputation you've worked so hard to build up. For a free report on your online reputation and to find out how we can help, visit Reputation.com.
Landlords, Direct Line guaranteed to beat any quote for the same cover. Can your landlord insurance do that? Search Direct Line Landlord. New customers only. Qualifying criteria apply. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
Employers across the UK, however small the business, will soon have to provide a workplace pension. It's the law. Act now. Search the Pensions Regulator. Workplace pensions. We're all in.
Sheila Fogarty on LBC.
We've just been talking about, Grant Shapps and I have just been talking about something off air. I won't mention it, but do you wish to?
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Fire away. It's interesting.
I just discovered that my grandmother was born in Dublin. In Ireland.
You're Irish.
Yes, so I found the 1901 census, UK census, and sure enough, it shows Dublin, Ireland, and she was born, I think, 1899. It looks like.
And you had no idea that she was.
I didn't know that, and I didn't know that if you have Irish grandparents, you can become an Irish citizen.
And you can get a nice, and
Irish
clearly
passport,
get a passport. Yeah.
Exciting.
Pleased about that? Yeah. Are you going to investigate it further?
I'm really chuffed about it. I think it might have to wait till after the election in terms of some priorities. But it's.
Do you want me to
one
get
of those...
Nikki Campbell and Davina McCall on the case?
Could you?
Yeah. I mean, I know that's normally about adoption, but still, I'm sure they've got good contacts. Okay, we'll leave that one there. We were quite engaged in that conversation. Let's take calls. I'll stop talking now. Steve in Basildon, over to you.
Hello, Grant. Good
Hi,
afternoon.
Steve. Hi.
My question's sort of in two parts. The first part is did the Conservatives support the whole idea of international aid, currently at $12 billion to the taxpayer, which I think is ridiculous? And can you please, if you do agree with it being put into law, can you justify it to us who are out here on low to middle incomes? It costs us £600 a year, mate.
So, look, first of all, look, I'm going to be completely blunt with you, Steve. Yes, we think that international aid is an important part of this country's role in the world, but let me explain why. When you see, I mean, not just the kind of moral case that there are people who die whose lives can be protected, and an awful lot of them, that's certainly true, but also the fact that actually a lot of the time you find that you end up creating bonds with countries which do several things. First of all, at the most serious end, I absolutely know that this money prevents areas descending into often very, very problematic breeding grounds for terrorist activity, which sure enough would end up on our shores just as it did on 7/7 in London and some of those other attacks. So I think it just in terms of pure self-interest, stopping parts of the world becoming so unstable that the problems end up here is kind of in Britain's interest. There's also just like a very practical level. You look at the money that we invested in Sierra Leone with the problem of Ebola and that outbreak, and the kind of costs that it would have meant in lives and physical money if that had really hit our shores in a big way, which it looked end of last year like it might do.
Ebola again.
Sorry, say again.
Ebola again. I'd just like to point something out about Ebola. It had no prospect to come into these shores because of two main things. One of them was the fact that Ebola spread by pure bad sanitation. And number two, we don't wash bodies in this country. The actual likelihood of an outbreak by Ebola in this country was so unlikely it was ridiculous. Then on top of that, I'd just like to add, we, the British public, were the biggest contributors through international aid in that. All the other countries in Europe didn't bother to give that much money over. Why are we so involved in that?
Well, look, first of all, I don't agree with your analysis. I mean, it so happens we had these COBRA meetings. These are these kind of high-level meetings at the Cabinet Office where you prepare the country for an emergency, and these threats look pretty blooming real. Actually, as it so happens, by chance, my office at Cabinet Office, because I'm a minister in the Cabinet, out of the Cabinet Office, actually I was turfed out my office in order for it to be used as one of the emergency response rooms for Ebola. I can assure you, Steve, the threat to this country was proper and real. And we did see, people, albeit that they come back from helping people there, if that outbreak had got into the hundreds of thousands or millions of people, I don't think there's any way at all that Britain could have prevented being part of it. And you're right, why does Britain have this wider responsibility? Well, because we're a big global player. We sit on one of the permanent members of the Security Council in the United Nations. And the final point I wanted to make in favour of this is this. I spent a lot of time in government trying to help us sell Britain abroad so that we all have jobs at home. And I'm talking about, going to countries where we don't necessarily have great historic links. I'm thinking of places like Vietnam, for example, but are developing economies, and they want to buy British jobs, British goods and services. And when you go to those countries, you discover that in return for actually relatively small amounts of aid, I'm talking about 50 million in the case there, that they are very receptive to Britain because they understand that we are part of the international community. They understand that we are a big trading partner potentially, and the door is open. Now, we never link inextricably trade and aid together.
But relationships grow.
Relationships are relationships, and you do find that we're probably winning a lot more jobs for Britain as a result.
OK, thank you for your call, Steve. Steve in Basildon. Joe in Cheshunt. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Grant. Hi, Sheila.
Hi.
I'd like to talk about housing. We've had 5 years of a Conservative government. There's all these pledges about building new first-time buyers' homes for under 40s. What does the Conservative propose to do if you're in the next government about private rental? I am 46. I had to go bankrupt after my divorce, so I will never be able to buy my own home at my age. I have 2 children. I also have an elderly mother living with me. I have to pay £1,250 a month in rent. The people that live next door to me, who are in housing association property, pay £700 a month in rent. Is there any plans from the Conservative Party to sort out this ridiculous situation where more and more people, working people, I work, but I have to claim housing benefit and blow a hole in my local council's budget to be able to afford to live in a house for two children that need to live near their local school.
Well, Joe, look, first of all, I agree. Housing costs in this country are astronomically high, and particularly in the capital. So, first of all, I agree with you about your analysis. Secondly, yes, we do have plans which are currently actually working their way through the system to do more about this. So, for example, one of the things which makes renting so expensive is, of course, we haven't got enough rental properties. So we've created a build-to-rent programme. Strange thing about this country, unlike you go to Germany or many other countries in Europe, you'll find that there are what they call institutional investors. So you'll get your pension funds building properties to rent, building homes to rent. Barely happens here. What you get is people doing buy-to-let. You very rarely seem to get people building good quality rental properties. If we had more of it, of course, it would bring down the price. So we're investing hundreds of millions of pounds into helping that whole new market area to develop, because that would give quality properties and it would bring down the rental costs. Of course, a lot more besides to do with building new homes, the Help to Buy schemes that you've been reading about. But I hear what you say and you feel about being a very long way away from the housing market. But it could be things like Help to Buy could assist you as well, because if you're paying £1,250 in rent, oftentimes you find a mortgage is less expensive than renting these days.
But then you need to stump up the deposit, don't you?
That's right. Well, that's what the Help to Buy scheme is about.
Oh, I see what you mean,
getting the deposit down to 5%.
Joe, is that of any use to you?
Well, I don't think so at all, especially when you hear that the Defence Department sold off, was it Churchill's war rooms for luxury apartments. And I think the biggest issue is I currently have to pay 6 months' rent in advance. £7,500 because I work part-time, because I am a carer. I do not earn £42,000, which is what the commercial and residential estate agents ask you, because you have to pass a credit check as severe as one to get a mortgage.
Yeah, and you're in Cheshunt, are you? You're close by my, because I'm next door in Welland Hatfield. So you're not. So listeners know you're not in central London. It's not. You're not paying. It's not because you're in sort of the hottest part of the property market. But I totally agree with you. But look, you can't solve this by waving a magic wand. You've got to build the homes, and you've got to have the homes for rental as well, I think.
I disagree. I think what you need to propose to do, which I can't see your party doing, because it's all about private business and industry, is rent controls and some kind of legislation to prevent private estate agents from, they are against anyone on a low income.
Well, Joe, can I just on the rent controls tell you, they simply don't work. When we had them in place, it shrunk the size of the number of properties available for rent, and the quality of those properties descended very, very badly into slums. So rent controls have been proven not to work throughout every single experiment with them. And we certainly don't want to go back to the days of rent controls. It contracted the market, whereas right now there are becoming more properties available for rent. Let's not go back to the bad old ways, no matter what the solution is.
Thank you for your call, Joe. I hope there was something in that for you, Joe, in Cheshunt. We'll continue to talk to the Conservative Party Chairman, Grant Shapps, between now and 3. I'll take a call in just a moment on adult social care as well, something that this programme is focusing on, as you probably know, for the rest of the year. You can see more about that on the LBC website, lbc.co.uk, and leave your own stories and your own questions there as well. You can watch this live on the website as well, my conversation, your conversations with Grant Shapps. More in a moment. It's 2:48.
I'm Joanne Webb. In the LBC Travel Centre in North London, there are delays in Seven Sisters because the Seven Sisters Road has been closed westbound between the A10 and St Anne's Road, and that's following an accident. Also in London, in Chelsea, the King's Road is closed westbound between Oakley Street and Old Church Street, and that's also after an accident. Delays continue in Kent on the A2 as it's closed in both directions at Whitfield following an accident. In fact, 2 separate accidents means the road is closed. In Staffordshire, the M6 is very slow south southbound to junction 11A at the M6 toll, still taking about 20 minutes to get from junction 12 at Gailey, and that was after an accident that happened earlier, but all the lanes are now back open. In Worcestershire, the M42 is very slow southbound from junction 5 at Solihull to junction 3 at the A435, and that's because of an accident. And in Manchester, only one lane's open on the M60 clockwise at junction 19 at Heaton Park. There are queues back to Simister Island, which is junction 18 at the M62. Keeping you moving, your next travel update is in half an hour.
This is LBC.
A house fire can take away a lifetime of memories in 2 minutes. About the time it takes to test all your smoke alarms. Fire kills. You can prevent it.
Make me magnetic.
This is Magnetic, the beautiful debut album from Miel de Botton.
Nuit d'amour, nuit d'ivresse. Vivement, vivement la joie.
Miel de Botton, Magnetic, out now.
If you run a business and you're near a computer, type the name of your company into Google now. Chances are everything you find will be good. But all it takes is one negative review and your reputation on any kind of digital and social media site can change just like that. Reputation.com can manage and improve your brand's image online to make sure potential customers find out about the good reputation you've worked so hard to build up. For a free report on your online reputation and to find out how we can help, visit Reputation.com.
Nobody wants to wake up to a chilly home. So if your boiler breaks down, it's good to know that British Gas engineers are only a phone call away. And that 92% of our surveyed home care customers would recommend our services. To find out more, call 0800 009 4747 or search Home Care from British Gas. Conditions apply.
To the wheelbarrow race winners and the Sunday League smashers, the chainsaw juggling champions and the sword scoffing masters, to the triathletes, the mathletes, to all of our fellow number ones, we say, boom! You did it, and so did we.
O2 has been ranked #1 network for customer service satisfaction by Ofcom for the 6th time in a row. O2, be more dog.
When it comes to driving in Old Blighty, you do things a little differently. There's not miles of long, straight roads over here, just roundabouts. Roads with barely enough room for a car, let alone the man in a van coming the other way. And of course, the speed bumps. Brilliant, isn't it? That's why the Volvo V40 R design was tuned and tested to tackle those wonderfully British roads. And from just $269 a month with Volvo car leasing, it's even been tuned for the British economy.
3-year personal contract hire agreement with initial rental of £807. Offer ends May 31st, subject to status, mileage and return conditions apply. Visit volvocars.co.uk for more details.
Book a test drive today at your nearest Volvo showroom. The Volvo V40 R design, made in Sweden, tuned for Britain.
What about this one, love?
Is it semi-detached?
Yeah.
Is it 3 bedrooms?
Uh-huh.
Does it have an ensuite?
Yeah.
Gas central heating?
Uh-huh.
Garden?
Yep.
South-facing?
Yeah.
Conservatory?
Yep.
Shops nearby?
Yeah.
Off-road parking?
Yeah.
Double glazing?
Mm-hmm.
Does it have a walk-in wardrobe?
It's got a shed.
It's difficult enough choosing the right house. At NatWest, we help make choosing your mortgage easier. We can even tell you how much you could borrow in just 10 minutes. Talk to us today about our lowest ever mortgage rates or search NatWest Mortgages.
Sheila Fogarty on LBC.
The Conservative Party Chairman Grant Shapps is here to take your calls. Let's go straight to them from Karen in Cardiff. Hi, Karen.
Oh, hi. Thank you for talking to me.
Pleasure. What did you want to ask?
Right. It's about, generally, it's about Britain's most vulnerable adults, to coin a phrase. I heard Grant say earlier about make a reference to protecting Britain's most vulnerable adults, and that seems to keep rolling off the tongue every time there's sort of welfare cuts introduced. They keep saying, yes, but we will protect Britain's most vulnerable adults. Now, I'm one of those adults. I've been through the new brutal benefit assessment procedure, and I actually got put in the support group of the employment support support allowance. That's not because I'm too fat to work or too lazy. It's because I'm an unemployed professional with a very, very debilitating illness. Now, I just wanted to ask you, I'm sure they wouldn't have said this if it didn't have some substance. About 3 months ago, there was a news item on Radio 4 that if Conservative get in, they're going to be cutting employment and support allowance by £30 a week, which is an awful lot of money. My entire weekly food budget is £25. Now, I just wanted to ask, like I said, I'm sure they wouldn't have announced it if it wasn't in some sort of white paper form or some written proposal. Can Grant tell me if that's actually going to happen if Conservatives get in at the next government? Is employment and support allowance going to be cut by £30 a week?
Karen, hi. No, I didn't hear that story, I'm afraid, so I don't want to kind of comment and mislead you on it. I'm afraid I'm going to have to sort of tell you some wider points, which I know won't entirely address your personal circumstances. But it is true to say that in every year of this government, in cash terms, we've actually increased the welfare budget, and we try to refocus that on the people who actually need it most. So when I talk about helping most vulnerable people, look, you want, and you would agree with me here, that you want people who can work to be able to go out to work, which is why it's great to see unemployment tumbling, including in many, many different categories where, for example, workless families, kids who've never had any parents in work, for example, and maybe for 2 or 3 generations are getting back into work. That's really good. But we also want to make sure we're supporting people who can't work through the various different things like personal independence payments. Because when you get into an individual case, I find this a lot when people come to see me in my constituency surgery, you really need to know a lot of facts and figures to get down to what the actual issue is. And you've mentioned going on to ESA or employment support allowance. Without knowing a lot more details, it's very, very difficult to comment. But I have not heard the story that you're talking about. And I can tell you that our intention is to make sure we carry on supporting the most vulnerable people.
Can I interject and just add
Sure.
to this? I'm just looking at a piece which was reported in The Guardian. I think it relates to what you're talking about here, Karen. It says... It says the government is considering cutting the value of the main employment and support allowance sickness benefit by as much as £30.
That's it.
Hang on, just let me elaborate. So it's effectively worth the same as job seekers allowance. This is from internal documents seen by the BBC, which is where Karen heard it. New claimants judged to be capable of work with appropriate support could be given only 50p more per week than people on job seekers allowance. Now, while you might not be able to, as things stand, dig right down into the figures, broadly speaking, is that the case? Because that's Karen's question.
Look, broadly speaking, what we want to do is make sure we have a system that supports people into work while supporting those who cannot work by having a proper safety net available. We should have one of the best safety nets in the world, make no mistakes. But if people can work, yes, of course, we want them to. And I think one of the great changes over the last few years, it's really been a jobs miracle, has been Ian Duncan Smith saying, look, rather than have a system that traps people on welfare, let's enable people to work where they can. And, that's how people have been, that's why unemployment's been tumbling here.
But what's your situation, Karen? You can't work.
Are you going to be cutting employment and support allowance for the people in the support group who are the most vulnerable, who have been assessed by the system you put in for assessment, which is very, very brutal? You can't just get people slipping and cheating the system and getting in there. They are Britain's most vulnerable adults. Are they going to have their benefits cut by £30 a week?
It's really simple. People who need support, the safety net will absolutely always have that support under a Conservative-led government. In fact, hold on, let me just answer this point. In fact, as mentioned, we've been putting more money, not less money, into welfare, which will surprise many listeners considering where a lot of people come from on this issue. So we've been putting more money in, and since we've got more people into work, then clearly the answer is that in the end, more money is going to those who cannot work, and it's unsuitable from work. Otherwise, we would be cutting the overall budget, wouldn't you? I mean, that's the logic of the situation. So we are trying to focus on people who need the help and cannot work, rather than have a system which pays for people who actually could and should be working. And I think it's not good for people not to work if they can.
So in conclusion, the people in the support group, which are the most vulnerable, which have been assessed as not being able to work by your brutal assessment system, will not be having their benefits cut because they cannot work.
We absolutely believe in helping people who are most vulnerable, and if they can't work, they should absolutely have the support of the state. Now, as I say, say, since we're not spending any less on welfare, to be clear, but pound for pound, we're putting more in. Since we're not spending any less and we've got more people going out to work, the only obvious conclusion is that we are spending the money more on the people who need it the most, right?
But you're going to make £12 billion of welfare cuts.
Yes, well...
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Sure,
I just wondered if that specific group was... You keep saying you're going to protect Britain's most vulnerable. Britain's most vulnerable are in that... The majority of them are in that support group of the employment and support allowance. They're in that area. And so obviously, if you're promising to protect them, you're not going to be cutting their benefits, are you?
Well, so for example, we've said that we want to, you're right, take £12 billion, and those cuts will come from the overall welfare budget. But that includes doing things like making sure that on welfare, people can't be receiving more than £23,000 a year, but not including things like disability benefits and other benefits which would go to the most vulnerable people. So we're looking at making sure that work always pays, but recognising that a Conservative government will always support people who are most vulnerable in our society.
But really briefly, because we are about to finish, the ESA, like any other welfare, will be in that mix of £12 billion cuts potentially.
Well, I don't want to mislead your caller by an article that I haven't seen on a policy which I haven't seen announced anywhere at all, by the way. So I don't want to mislead your caller, but I do make the general point. The welfare budget's gone up, not down, and that means the money is being focused on people who need it most.
Will there be more clarity? I'm sorry, I keep asking you more questions. Briefly, will there be more clarity in the budget next week? I know you can't tell us the detail on things like this. So Karen, listen to we're going to broadcast the budget live and we'll talk about it afterwards. So Karen and anyone else interested in where those cuts are going to fall, do tune into that.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've done is to be very clear about where we are trying to make those savings so people know what they're getting.
Grant Shapps, Conservative Party Chairman, many thanks for coming. We'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The time is 3:00.
On FM, online, on your mobile and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.